So the England women's football team are in the final of the Euros, but not everyone is happy about this. One BBC presenter decided to complain on air that the team is all white. Let's take a look.
Finals, but all starting 11 players and the 5 substitutes that came onto the pitch were all white. And that does point towards a lack of diversity in the women's game in England.
And funny enough, this has actually been one of the BBC's most complained about moments of the entire month. So clearly the public disagrees with this assessment. Ella, what do you make of it?
It's just very funny that, at the moment when the whole narrative around, rightly or wrongly, around women's football and this particular competition is about, inclusivity and everyone sort of, saw from grinning about how happy they are that women's football is back on the map.
And how much we love watching women's football and have always been fans our entire lives.
It almost puts you off because you're like, you have to love it, even though it is actually extremely entertaining and most of us are authentically quite excited by it. That someone would come along and just shit on it. It's just wreck it. It's like, yeah, but they're all white. It's like, oh, come on. There's a real kind of miserliness to this. And it shows you then, on a serious point, it shows you the kind of the zero-sum game that is identity politics, because it can just never be good enough. Like if half the team were black, then it would be like there's too many able-bodied ones. If, it could just keep going on and on and on. And so I think that it's right that most people complained, despite the fact that we usually say, complaints to Ofcom or things like that are really lame. Yeah. Actually, if it displays a little bit of public dissent, then maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah, a bit of pushback against this kind of mindless racialization of absolutely everything. And it's interesting because it's not even, looking at some of the facts and figures around this, it just so happens that this squad is particularly white. But over the years, I think it's between 2010 and 2020, there's actually been a disproportionate number of black female players who've been capped. And fair play to them. Let's not squash their quota either. That would be obscene. Luke, what have you made of it?
Well, let's just take a moment to reflect how amazing this competition has been. For women's football, it's such a great thing that there is slowly a kind of parity emerging between men and women's football. And the same is happening in other sports. Like women's boxing is becoming absolutely massive, and the female stars in boxing share the stage with men. And it ties into our earlier conversation about gender. Women's sport is worth defending, worth standing up for. And I think it's fantastic that women's football is now taking the place that it has. And you're right in the sense that to complain that the squad is too white. I mean, women's football is relatively new. Yeah. In terms of professional football, it's only been a couple of decades that women have been playing professionally, and far less than that. In terms of its evolution. These players are players who could never have made it to this stage even 10 years ago. So to comment on skin colour is completely ridiculous. And thankfully, I don't think it will cut through the genuine euphoria that people seem to be experiencing around this competition. Yeah. Because people are enthralled that we are now in the final. People seem to be getting behind it in ways which just hasn't happened before. And I think that has to be a good thing. So it also illustrates for me how sometimes identity politics can only go too far, because I don't think many people out there in the public getting behind the Lionesses are seriously worried about whether these players are white or black.
And Ella, what do you make of the way that sort of the white is kind of implied as a bit of a swear word? Because, no one on the BBC had to fill in the blanks and say, and this is a bad thing. It's just, you just kind of know that it's bad.
It leads to the ridiculous situations and conversations you see on social media where people then start talking about white racism or where people start saying
white fragility.
Yeah, and there's the whites are being attacked, but that's what happens when you have this kind of level of discourse around identity politics, is that people take things, as Luke said, don't matter and shouldn't matter, and create a kind of politics around them. I mean, like Jon Snow talking about the crowd of protesters,
the pro-Brexit protesters,
being so white, as if it's like that's terrible. Yeah. And you do just think, well, actually, the reality behind this, with the Jon Snow thing, probably less so with the Lionesses thing, is that most of the time what people mean is it's so working class. Or a lot of the time what they mean is, the American equivalent is so white trash. Yeah. Because that's the intonation behind it. It actually often has nothing to do with the group of people's actual skin colour.
Those are the people being racialised as white.
I also think it's worth pointing out that sometimes people just think they ought to say that. They think this is just what you ought to say. When a group of people happen to be white, it's sort of expected expected that you'd point out that they're white.
Yeah.
And it is very strange. It's a strange way to react to what is otherwise a euphoric event, you know, a national team being in the semi-final, the elevation of women's sport to a place it hasn't been to ever before. And you react to it in a way which you're sort of oddly expected to. And it just sounds odd. For most people, it just sounds weird. But I think there is this expectation that you point it out. Like Jon Snow, he just saw that crowd and thought, well, I probably should say that they're all white.
But he wouldn't have said the same at an Extinction Rebellion rally or when he's been to Wimbledon.
Which really is really white.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, you know, Luke's right. You shouldn't say
If you're going to do your ethnic bean counting, you're going to notice it more there.
Yeah. You're seeing more and more events now, aren't you? Glastonbury, Latitude, obviously. All of these are just predominantly white.
Yeah, and being criticised as such. Well, you know, let's wish the Lionesses the best of luck, and let's hope that BBC doesn't ruin it with its inane racial commentary.